Oh, yes, yes. The first question we've got to ask is, where's Brooke?
Where is Brooke?
Yes, yes. So let's kick it off.
Where's Wally, but the Brooke edition?
Yes, where's Brooke? We haven't seen her do many ministerial speeches in the House for a while.
To consider the bill. At the appropriate time, I intend to move that the bill be reported to the House by the 22nd of April 2025. Mr Speaker, the Employment Relations Pay Deductions for Partial Strikes Amendment Bill reintroduces the ability of employers to make pay deductions in response to partial strikes. This change to collective bargaining settings will provide a far more effective and efficient bargaining environment where rights and consequences are more balanced and which minimises potential disruption to public services. We have seen partial strikes result in patients facing delays to receiving medical scans and treatment due to medical staff limiting the number of scans they completed each day, and kids missing out on education due to teachers refusing to teach certain year groups on certain days. However, in spite of these inconveniences created by the withdrawal of people's work, there were no pay packet consequences for the medical staff or teachers involved in these partial strikes. Earlier this year, train operators in Wellington undertook a work-to-rule industrial action, including refusing shift changes, which led to disruption for travellers. And currently, the New Zealand Defence Force Public Service Association union members are working to rule. They've been taking coordinated breaks and stopped working at heights or off-site. The Minister of Defence has responded by authorising uniformed personnel to cover civilian work in selected areas. Needless to say, this is a rare move from the Minister of Defence, and it's a shame that it's been made necessary by this industrial action. On the other hand, when a full strike occurs, employers can respond by suspending the employees and not providing pay. In this situation, there are negative consequences for both sides. The employees lose pay, the employer loses output. This provides an incentive for both sides to cease industrial action and return to the bargaining table as soon as possible. The same cannot be said for partial strike action under the current rules. If an employee is engaged in a partial strike, the employer's options are to either accept the partial strike action or to lock out or suspend the employees for the duration of the strike. Employers who do not want to be so heavy-handed in their response have no choice but to continue to pay the partially striking workers in full. There is currently no provision to allow a more nuanced or proportionate response, as would be normal in a society where people believe in cause and effect thinking. The ability to make pay deductions in response to partial strikes was introduced in 2014 as part of a package of amendments aimed at ensuring a flexible and fair employment relations framework for both employees and employers. In 2018, the previous government removed employers' ability to reduce pay in response to partial strikes. Now, once this bill becomes law, an employer will not have to make a pay deduction in response to partial strikes. Under this bill, it will be an option for an employer involved in a negotiation. Employers will again be able to respond to partial strikes by being able to either reduce an employee's pay by a proportionate amount or deduct 10% of their pay. The ability to make a fixed deduction of 10% gives employers a choice in situations where it may be difficult to calculate a proportionate pay deduction. For example, for a large workforce, without the option to make it a fixed deduction, the administrative costs of calculating the proportion of work impacted could mean that it is not practical for some employers to make a deduction. Restoring employers' ability to make pay deductions for partial strikes could help incentivise both parties to return to the bargaining table and reach agreement sooner. This will reduce the impacts on communities that result from ongoing industrial action. I consider that enabling employers to make partial pay deductions provides the opportunity for a more balanced and appropriate response to partial strikes. It's also more consistent with the approach used in Australia and the United Kingdom. While I recognise the entitlement of employees to strike in support of their collective bargaining claims, they should not be able to do it at no cost to themselves, effectively putting the cost onto the employer, and as we heard in the case of schoolchildren and their parents and those patients waiting for vital medical scans, actually putting the cost onto the customers or the patients or the students of their employer. In conclusion, this bill will provide employers with a specific response to partial strikes by reintroducing the ability to make pay deductions in response to partial strikes. It is sensible, proportionate change that should minimise potential disruption to public services. All New Zealanders will be able to have their say on the bill when it goes to Select Committee. Mr Speaker, I just hasten to add that I have brought this bill and taken the speech on behalf of the Minister for Workplace Relations, the Honourable Brooke van Velden. And I have to say that while she could not be in the House today, she is doing a superb job across the portfolio of making our labour laws make sense for contractors, with holidays pay, with personal grievances. And I hear Camilla Bellich, the one-time employment lawyer, braying away there, saying she's constantly taking workers. Actually, she's not. And it says something about Camilla Bellich's attitude towards the workers, that she believes something like this bill, the idea that if you work, you get paid. If you don't work, you don't get paid. If you work less, you get paid less. If you work more, you get paid more. To most New Zealanders, this kind of logic is common sense and first nature. To the Labour Party, they believe that you should be able to go on strike, inconvenience patients, inconvenience students, inconvenience parents, and still get paid the full amount, all the while creating incentives to continue industrial action. Well, Mr. Speaker, once upon a time there was a Labor Party that actually believed in public services for the public. Their interest was an equal opportunity for every child to get an education, for every patient, whether or not they had the means to get healthcare. And what do you have today? You have a Labor Party that's going to stand up and complain and say it's an attack on workers to say that if you don't work, you don't get paid, and if you do work, you do get paid, and if you go on strike, you are withholding your work and not working, so you don't get paid. And then
Ms Bellich, I note that you're the next speaker. That might be a good better opportunity than yelling across the House.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've seen Ms Bellich give many speeches, and I'd never contest your ruling, but I'm not entirely sure about that one. Mr. Speaker, the thing about it is...
yeah, Mr Seymour, sit down. Kamala Bellich.
Oh, no.
You've challenged, criticised the Speaker's ruling, so I've curtailed your speech. So if your point of order is in relation to that, don't bother.
Well, actually, Mr. Speaker, it is, because it was clearly in jest. I was facing significant barracking.
To which, Mr Seymour, I had intervened, and you didn't need to do that. Sit down, Kamala
Well,
Bellich.
actually, Mr. Speaker, I've got a right...
sit down, Mr Seymour. Kamala Bellich.
What a little bitch, man.
I mean, like, talking about this, like, you know, you take your break with, you know, if your employer's currently understaffing you, you took your break, big 10% pay cut. You know,
yeah.
Are they trying to introduce Ron of Viva La Dirt League to sit there and the pay cut?
Yeah, you know, under the bill, right, a worker can be paid less than minimum wage. Also, he's like, oh, this is in line with what Australia does. Well, I looked up what Australia does. In Australia, the reduction in payment is communicated with the employee. The employee is given a written notice stating that because of the partial work ban, the employee's payments will be reduced by the proportion specified in the notice, right? This bill that David is advocating for is worse than the current standards in Australia, because under this bill, the employer does not have to inform the employee of the amount that will be deducted until the deduction takes place. So it's worse.
So we're going to hit payday shock.
Yep, payday shock.
And here's the other thing is, who's the arbiter of what happens when does the employer go, I'm the aggrieved party and I've got the signing power to the checks, so I can play multiple roles in that, you know? Like, how do you ensure something like, I can't work, you know, I can't take overtime, does not get mistaken as a 10% pay deduction? Going to the toilet, is that going to be seen as strike action, 10% pay deduction?
Yeah, well, I mean, defines what warrants a pay deduction? Like, I don't hear anything.
Like, you know, you can go work to rule with, like, a great example was the work to rule with Transdev.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at what New Zealand defines as a partial strike. So here it is. This is what you could be doxxed for. Refusing to work overtime, limiting the number of scans completed if you're a doctor, refusing to teach certain year groups if you're a teacher, taking coordinated breaks if you work for a business that doesn't have enough staff, refusing to work at heights or off-site. So if you work in an industry like forestry, hey, go cut down that dangerous tree. You don't want to? Fine, fuck you. Refusing shift changes. So, yeah, this is like common shit that a normal person would look at and go, yeah, you shouldn't have to do that because it's unreasonable. But they've seen the powers of these motherfuckers who want to.
Are people going to get pay deductions because they have a Veronica skit on Facebook where, what do you call it? I changed the roster at 2 a.m. this morning and you closed at 11 p.m. Why weren't you here at 6 a.m. this morning?
Yep. And even worse, I'll just respond to Dave pretty quickly. So it's an undocumented pay cut. Well, they don't have to announce the pay cut until they enforce the pay cut. So they don't have to take it.
It's a bit like the design plan of the benefit sanctions.
Yeah.
You know, let's give the short, sharp shock of a punishment. But what happens when you get it wrong? And that's the thing that needs to be in there. If you do a 10% pay deduction that is deemed unlawful, what's the penalty for the employer?
I know, and even worse, like you look at people who are minimum wage, right? What does a 10% deduction mean for them? That could mean the difference between being able to get to work and not being able to go to work.
Yeah.
So,
and who's responsible when shit goes wrong? Because I can tell you right now, the people who go out and do negative consequences on people aren't prepared to own the negative actions and be responsible for it. It's like saying, hi there, I've made you starve to death, but I should not be charged for starving you to death because I'm not responsible for my actions. And that's the thing there is. People talk about consequences, but people do not talk about the flow-on effects and consequences. Not enough people have the guts to say, I made that bad decision and I owned it.
Well, here's the thing. Dave is like asking, where's the paper trail? Well, in Australia, they've got a paper trail. Your employer has to give it to you in writing what they're going to do. Here, they don't have to.
Exactly. Exactly. And what's that doing? Oh, it's to bring in sloppy, subpar standards.
Yep.
Sloppy, subpar standards. Sorry, but that does not wipe with me or with anyone.
I'm worried about this bill because I've got an older sister. She's going to be doing joinery, starting up a joinery job next week, doing aluminium joinery, and she's working at minimum wage because she's an assistant.
Yeah.
She's part of a union, right? If she gets shitty work conditions, her striking, she wouldn't be able to go to work. She's already stretched as it is financially.
Yeah. Oh, well, let's see what...